This episode is brought to you by Absolute Landscapes. Absolute Landscapes is a landscape maintenance company that focuses heavily on commercial property maintenance. Call today for information about the services we provide and how we can best help you. 803-427-5944. I thought you told me that you used it. I wanted to ask you that earlier when we were talking, but it slipped my mind. But yeah, this is a really neat software, man.
Definitely. Big upgrade.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you've probably used it a lot longer than I have, but just for the short time that I've had it, it's really neat. You know, it's got some good features and whatnot.
Definitely.
So yeah, man. So I guess how we can start this thing is if you just kind of want to introduce yourself and you know, give a little kind of bring us up to speed, a little background story on yourself, and you know, just kind of say something, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, man. Well, my name's Ross Leppala. I live now just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Grew up in northern Minnesota. Lived there pretty much my entire young life. And then when I graduated college, moved up to Alaska for 12 years. And did all kinds of stuff all over. Was an engineer for a long time, civil structural engineer. Walked away from that career in 2017 to coach powerlifting full time. And it was actually a couple years prior to that I started my mental health journey. And that's been an amazing part of my life, and it's changed absolutely everything. Like it's pretty crazy. But in addition to coaching powerlifting and being a partner and a father and all those different roles that I participate in, I'm also a big mental health advocate, having gone through some significant hardships in my youth and carrying those for a very long time in my adult life and realizing how limiting those were in my experiences and the quality of my life, and then starting that mental health journey and going down that road and finding the journey of expansion and seeking. It has been, I mean, it's hard to summarize in one word, in all honesty. Right. So there's been no shortage of change and growth and expansion as a result of that. And it's one of those ones that I think that more people need to go through. Like, just by virtue of, like, if you watch, when I see things in like the media and you see people that get really offended, right? Like, being offended is a sign of you're not good with yourself. If you're offended, then you're taking things personally, and taking things personally is that you're not grounded in yourself. You're not comfortable with yourself. And that's how I operated for many years, till I was 28 was when I started walking this path. And it's been, you know, a lot of hard work, because you got to look at yourself and be really brutally honest with yourself and like, hey, how are you showing up? Are you showing up in a way that you can be proud? No. And when you finally make that omission, it can be a tough reality, but it's worth it.
So first of all, that was a hell of a kickoff. But there's a couple different points, man. I guess maybe the first thing I want to say, just kind of see what you're up to these days. How does like coaching, how does that differ from like a personal trainer? When you say coaching powerlifting, is it kind of in the same ballpark, or how does that differ?
Well, the clientele and demographic that we work with are competitive athletes.
Okay.
Particularly, like, a large amount of them are competitive, and if they're not at a national level, they're trying to get to a national level and or even a world level. A lot of our lifters are world level competitors. Our roster with our company is all over the world. I would say around 50% of our roster is international throughout the world, through Europe and Asia and Australia and different things of that nature. Part of some of our coaches on our coaching staff are also international. We have one in Australia, one in, I forget which country in Europe. Belgium? Okay. No, she competes in Belgium a lot. She lives in the one next to Belgium. Netherlands, I think. I can't remember. So, and another one in Thailand.
Okay. So when you say coaching, I guess this is like in a different space than like personal trainer. You know, personal trainer is just like your average person who's maybe trying to get in shape. You're more of like I guess maybe competitive power lifters, I guess is what it is.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's
Working with
interesting.
athletes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever met anybody who I mean, I've met tons of personal trainers, but you know, people who specifically coach like I guess I mean, I don't know. Do you do anything other than powerlifting, or is this like competitive bodybuilding, or like is it just specifically powerlifting?
It's primarily powerlifting.
Okay.
That's what our company, that's what we specialize in, is coaching for powerlifting.
Okay.
There are some lifters on our roster that aren't competitive powerlifters. I have had some people that I've worked with that weren't competitive powerlifters, but
Hmm.
they liked the style of powerlifting training, and that's why they came to us. A longtime client of mine is Air Force and plays rugby in the Air Force and
Okay.
prefers to train via powerlifting style. And like in short, what that looks like is you're doing a lot more maximal effort lifting in a lower rep range. Like
Right.
a lot
Right.
of our reps are 5 or less compared to like general health and fitness is probably going to be 8 or more.
Right. I got you. Yeah,
So
that's interesting, man. We'll come back to that. Because that is interesting. We'll come back to that. Um, but okay, so the mental health stuff. So you touched on a lot of stuff right there in the first few minutes, man. So you mentioned about like you see people get offended and they're not comfortable with themselves, and you also mentioned too that you think everybody should go through something similar to this, and both of those things are really powerful statements because I think I agree with them.
right.
Well, actually, I know I agree with them, but I mean, I've heard I can't I don't know how many people that I would say are hyper successful who I have heard say that some of the best things they think have ever happened to them have been the most what would you say, painful maybe, you know,
Right.
is something that's transformed who they are as people in a better way, you know. I mean, of course, when you're going through it, you probably think it's not that great at all. But once you look back and you've grown from it and you've kind of healed from that, I think most people would agree that that's one of the best things that well, maybe not the thing specifically, but the outcome that
Right.
they got from that. And
Right.
so I think that's a pretty important point. Um, so I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. I mean, what is it? Do you think it's because I don't, maybe not everybody has that experience. Like maybe if somebody goes through something that they would consider traumatic, it just kind of does them in. And I'm just curious, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. I mean, what's the difference? Like how do some people have that be the best thing they've ever went through, and some people, you know, they almost never recover from that? I mean, I don't know. I'm really just genuinely curious.
Right. It's looking for the meaning.
Hmm.
You have to look for the meaning rather than look for like something to make it go away. So like backing all the way up to understand maybe where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
In elementary, I got bullied a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what that did for me, the way I experienced it, was it inundated my brain. So it wasn't just that I was getting and being called names from my peers.
Mm-hmm.
It became my self-talk. I believed what
Mm.
they said to me, and I said it to myself. And when you start saying those things to yourself, you can't ever escape it. It's with you every step of the way. And that gets really fucking tiring.
Oh yeah.
Can I swear here? We good?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You're good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because I like to swear.
Yeah. No, you're good, man.
Cool. And that gets really tiring to carry that
Mm-hmm.
around. And at age 12, I thought the only way like to make that stop was if I took my life.
Mm.
And I sat down and attempted to take my life. And fortunately, I was able to stop before I did any irreversible harm to myself. And it was in 7th grade, a couple of months after that incident, that I found sports and found barbell training. And that was the thing that finally gave me something to blow some steam off. I got to,
Mm.
you know, football, I got to hit somebody as hard as I wanted to. Like, sign me up, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And not get in trouble for it. Cool.
Right.
Lifting weights, I was good at it right away. It gave me something to be good at. It helped me be better at football. And so I started to finally get positive recognition from my peers. long story short, what that did is it created my, like, all my self-worth was derived from external validation. I needed to win. I needed to accomplish. I needed to do the next thing to get the attaboy, to feel good about myself. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized all my self-worth is derived from external validation. And there is no sustainability in external validation. There is no confidence in external validation. There is no self-worth in external validation. External validation is not the enemy. But if external validation is all that you have and you don't have the internal validation, you will not be able to show up from a place of power. You will show up from a place of seeking other people to tell you that you're okay. And that is a lonely place. That is you are at the whim and control of everybody and everything else.
Exactly.
And it sucks. And I finally realized that. I had that aha moment that, man, I've been carrying that shit around with me my whole life, and it's limited every relationship, whether it be friendship or romance, limited my career, limited everything. And I'm fucking tired of it. So that's when I got therapy, and that started that journey. And so to like go back to that question, you have two, there's always more than two options, but the two basic options are, one, you can go to the left and wait for somebody else to make it better. You can allow yourself to remain in the victimhood mindset. And when you walk that path, it's a very lonely path, because ain't nobody coming to make it better ever.
Exactly.
Or you can take the right. You can take the other path. And part of that path is looking for the meaning. Have you ever read Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning?
I have. Yep. I've referred to that book several times, actually. Yep.
So anybody that's out there that hasn't read it, like, your very high level synopsis of the book is, you don't need suffering, you don't need trauma, you don't need hardship to find meaning in life. But when you do find yourself in those situations, you have to find the meaning behind it. And if you don't find the meaning behind it, that's when you will remain stuck in the shit.
Yep. That's a excellent way to put it, man. I think that's a very good summary of that book. So you mentioned about this thought process that you had, these I guess opinions basically about yourself that other people, so these people said things to you and that became your own opinion of yourself.
Yep.
It's almost impossible to state how profound of a realization that is, because I think a lot of us don't understand. I mean, it might come from peers, or it might come from parents or siblings or family, but we don't understand, like, a lot of what we think about ourselves is not even what we think. It's just what we've what we've heard so long, or what we've, been around so long. And then we go into adulthood, a lot of us, with these thoughts and these core beliefs. And it's like, these aren't even our thoughts. It's something that was given to us by another person who had their own damage that they didn't deal with. And so now it was basically passed, deflected onto us.
Yep.
And it's almost impossible to state how important that is to realize that.
Agreed.
And you mentioned something else too about, these external achievements being your validation, and getting the validation from your peers and stuff. I mean, I mentioned earlier about these hyper successful people. You had to ask yourself, like, what percentage of those people are basically operating out of that mindset? Like, for example, success obviously takes hard work, and it takes dedication, and it takes, consistency. But, like, I'm just curious, what percentage of those people are operating out of that external validation frame? In other words, so if they're trying to do all this if they're trying to move up the ranks in their company, and first of all, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to try to be the highest productive earner in your field or whatever. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to climb the corporate ladder or any of that. I'm just saying, what percentage of that is people who think this way, who think like, oh, well, if I can climb the corporate ladder, if I can do this, then I'll finally be okay with myself. Then that's like a driving force, I feel like, for some people. But like you mentioned earlier, that's not sustainable.
Right.
First of all, it's not sustainable. Second of all, if something happens and you lose that, you lose your sense of self.
Yep.
And then that's in a worse situation than I feel like you were to begin with, because then you feel like, I mean, if the meaning of who you are is attached to something external, like what you're talking about, um, if it's taken away from you, or if it's like a spouse or a partner, if they decide to not give you, the attention they normally give you for that day, then your sense of self is going to be basically, it's going to be shattered because it's not on a solid foundation to begin with. So that's also another critical point.
I agree.
And okay, so let me back up here for a second before I get too far ahead of myself. So you had this thought process that you had, and you were basically seeking external validation from outside sources. But you mentioned in there about sports. So you said that sports. What was it? Just sports, or did you start? Was it lifting at that time, or what? What? How did that? What was it? Just sports, I guess. Just in general, sports.
Yeah, I mean, you can lump training lifting weights into sports, because I lifted weights to be better at sports.
Okay.
Like I played football and basketball and ran track. Like I did as much as I could, because one, it was fun. I enjoyed it. Two, it gave me an outlet. Three, like that was my sense of worth, right? Like,
Right.
so I had to do that thing. I had to do those things. I wasn't grounded within myself. And what's interesting, like I still train, I still lift, but I don't lift for that external validation. I don't lift for that accomplishment. Sure, when I accomplish a PR, it's fantastic. I enjoy it. I like it, but that's not why I lift. And we talk about that with our clients a lot. Like, why do you lift? What is your reason? Like, for me, when I started asking myself, like, what can I learn from this training session that benefits my life? What skills am I cultivating? I start realizing I'm gaining so much more than just physical strength.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the things that started to create an internal validation and an internal grounding through lifting, rather than just the seeking of external. And so one of the things that happens in that state, excuse me, when you get through that point and you're not seeking that external validation, you don't have to have that. When you go out and you have a poor performance, you're not broken from it. You don't have a bad time. You question the training. You question, like, what did I do that led to less than what I'm capable of performance? And you analyze some of those things so that you can learn and grow from it.
Well,
but
yeah, I was gonna say you have to grow. Yeah.
Right. But you're not like, you don't fall into this pity party of, oh, I'm no good, I'm not worth it. You think about the highest level of athletes, like LeBron James. If he misses a game-winning shot, he doesn't go into the locker room like, oh, I'm the worst basketball player ever. No, he's likely never had those thoughts. I shouldn't say never, but if he does have those thoughts, he does have the ability to quickly get over them, and he doesn't wallow in a bath of self-shit pity party.
Right, exactly.
And that's what I was before.
Yeah, that goes back to what we were saying to begin with. It's your perception of it. Like, how do some people have the same, almost the identical trauma, and there's different outcomes? It just goes back to how you perceive it. And if you look at every single, I don't want to say failure because it's not a failure, but if you look at every single loss or every single thing that doesn't happen the way you thought it was going to, and if you look at that as just like a catastrophe, like I don't see how you can advance because of that.
Agreed.
It's interesting, man. I've seen like MMA trainers and boxers and things like that. Most of the time these people fight, they train people to fight, but they also fight themselves. And it's interesting because if you look at their social media pages or whatever, it'll say, X number of wins and X number of lessons. Like they don't see it as losses, it's a lesson. And so I think that the mindset we have about those failures is really important too.
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you with that, but I just wanted to make that point.
No worries. I think a really cool way to look at stuff like that as well. Like, a lot of people get stuck in this mindset of like, oh, this always happens to me. You know why it always happens to you? Because you forgot to learn the lesson that you were supposed to learn. And life has a really unique way of presenting that lesson for you over and over and over again until you learn it and create and cultivate the change to make different choices, to behave differently, to respond differently. And then when you do that, that thing stops happening.
Yeah, for sure.
There's the lesson. right? Just like I love the way that that's put. Like then you get the win, and because you learned the lesson.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many different directions. We've been talking for about 20 minutes, man, and you have condensed so much information into 20 minutes. Like you're probably the most efficient speaker I've ever heard. Like we've talked about, I feel like so much in just in this 20-minute section. I don't know what avenue, because I feel like I got off on a tangent and I don't want to redirect us here.
It's all good.
So you said that you were 12 years old. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there was something that came up when you were talking that popped into my head too. Like,
Okay.
How you get kind of conditioned from your external world.
Mm-hmm.
Like those thoughts that you have, those beliefs that you have, they're not yours.
Yep.
Whether it be from your peers or your parents or anything like that, they're all learned.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of key critical components to that too. If they're all learned, there's two things from learned. That means it can be unlearned and or learned differently. And that's massive. That's huge. So then the thing becomes, we have to, if we want to have a high quality life, if we want to have really cool, epic experiences, if we want to have joy and meaning, then we have to intentionally define our values, our beliefs, and not just always adopt them because somebody else said jump.
Right.
That is massive. And when we intentionally define ourselves, when we intentionally define our core values, our core beliefs, and we operate in alignment from there, man, what an awesome place that is to experience life.
Yeah.
Defining yourself on your terms. Oh, man, it's there's really no way to describe how amazing that is. You just have to experience it.
Well, I think that almost by definition, I think that's what true confidence is. I think that is what confidence is.
Right.
And I've always said, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, I've always said that the best way to build confidence is to prove yourself to yourself. You know, if there's something that you feel like you can't, because we all have this like, this like intuition thing, this gut feeling about things. Well, I personally I don't think that's an accident. I don't believe that comes from just nowhere, but if we can prove ourselves to ourselves, if we have a gut feeling about something, or if we're trying to pursue a goal or a dream or whatever it is, and we can make that happen, we can prove ourselves to ourselves. And I think after that, we start to trust ourselves, once and it doesn't have to be something huge. It's just these minor things. If you say every day this week, I'm going to wake up at 7 a.m. sharp. If you do that, you're proving yourself to yourself.
Right.
And it sounds, man, that sounds like such small things, but when you do those things on a consistent basis, you learn that you can trust yourself. Like you can,
yep.
I mean, I don't know how else to say it other than you prove yourself to yourself.
For sure.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
The confidence thing, to me, that is just trust in yourself to operate from a place of alignment with your core values and beliefs. Like I've talked about it in other places and spaces before as a recovering people pleaser. The reason why that is not a healthy place to operate from is there is no way for you to trust yourself or the other person to trust you, because when you're operating from a space of people pleasing, you are not doing the thing that you really want to do. And it is, it is manipulation. If you're people pleasing to try and get approval from somebody else and you're not doing it because you really want to do it, that is a form of manipulation. And it's just, glossed over because it's from this nice guy mentality, and it's because you're doing nice and being nice. Well, fuck that. You're also giving yourself away. And that was a major realization for myself is I'm not doing that thing because I want to do it. Then I need to not do it. I need to fucking choose it and own it, or not do it. And that instills trust and confidence in yourself. And like all those things, the reason why I think more people need to walk through this journey and go through those things is because all those things, they're learned. They're skills. They're not anything that anybody can give you. People can help guide you towards cultivating that. But at the end of the day, it's still a skill that's learned just as much as shooting a basketball is a skill or lifting a weight is a skill. All that stuff is created.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You mentioned something, man. It's funny how that works. It's funny how that people pleasing thing works, because if you're a people pleaser, the effect it has is actually the opposite. Unless the person you're interacting with is a narcissist, you're exactly right.
Right.
Like people are not going to trust you if you're just agreeing with everything that they say. Um, and so it's just funny how it has the exact opposite effect of what you would think it would have if you're trying to, please. Because like, how do you know what a person really thinks or wants if they're just trying to please everybody?
For sure.
You don't. I mean, and you can't trust. I don't want to say you can't trust people like that, but you really can't. Like, you can't trust people that way. And of course, if people can't trust you, then going back to this thing we're talking about, that's going to influence how people see you. And you do that with enough people, and then it's like, well, everybody sees you this way, and then you're going to think that the world sees you this way, and then it's like a snowball effect, man.
For sure.
It's a feedback loop.
And I think most people look at and think about trust as, telling the truth or not lying. But the thing is to realize, in the moment of participating in people-pleasing behavior, you're telling a lie. It's a lie.
Yep.
Like, it might be a nice lie, and it's not lying about, I don't know, something like you're cheating on somebody or something like that, but it's still a lie nonetheless. Like, and that undermines trust with yourself and with that other person. And whether you are aware of it or not, it does that.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Because if you don't have, I don't know how else to put it. If you don't have boundaries, unless the person that you're interacting with is a narcissist, unless they feed off of this kind of thing, then they're not. That's not a relationship you can have. And I mean intimate relationship or professional or whatever. So Ross, let me ask you this before we go too far away from this. I want to get back to this for a second. Yes, okay. So you said 12 years old. You were like, you said suicidal at 12?
Correct. I literally attempted to take my life.
I just think back to when I was 12, like, early teenage or even teenage years. There's already so much shit going on in life, man. Like, you're just, you're going from a child to an early adult basically. And there's all these things happening, and that's already a hard time,
right?
For most people.
Yep.
But then you have this on top of that. Like, you have, basically, I guess the best way to phrase it is like is it maybe like you were your own worst enemy? Like, you saw yourself as I don't know what your thought process was. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in those, just kind of see like where you're operating from. I don't want to insinuate or assume.
Right. So going into more detail on that, like on the average day going to school, I'd get picked on the bus. I'd get picked on at school. I'd get picked on the way home from school. And mind you, the hometown I was in, kindergarten through 12th grade was all in one building with 300 students. Very, very tiny town. So everybody knew everybody. Like, even the seniors knew the kindergartners. Like, that's how small it was. Everybody knew everybody. And in that small town, the way I describe it is, if you weren't a generational kid,
right?
The generational kids were automatically in the cool kids group. Anybody else, you kind of had to find your way and make your way to either the cool kids group or the losers. And I found my way into the losers bracket somehow. And as a result, I got picked on a lot. And at that time, particularly during that day and age, while well-intentioned, I got from my parents a lot. Oh, well, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words may never hurt you. And, to toughen up, and I cried a lot, and I got made fun of for crying a lot, and then that made me cry even more. And then I got told boys don't cry, and all that stuff was so painful. And I had no place to express it, nobody trying to connect with me, because this idea of sticks and stones may break your bones, all that was doing was invalidating the pain that I was experiencing. And the thing about trauma is just defined as like an event in your life that you're not emotionally capable of coping with at that time. So when you're a kid, you're not very emotionally intelligent.
Right.
So it doesn't take a lot for an event to be traumatic for a kid. And sticks and stones may hurt your bones, but words may never hurt you. Words are powerful. Words inundate your mind. And if you don't have the tools to cope with that, they're going to get stuck in there. And I didn't have the tools to cope with that. And that's how they got stuck in there. And when it becomes your self-talk, at the end of the day, your self-talk is so important because the things that you say to and about yourself are the things you believe about yourself. The things you believe about yourself dictate and drive how you show up and participate in the world, and how you show up and participate in the world dictates the quality of your experiences. So the way I look at it is self-talk drives the core of a lot of things. And mine was, at that time, it was awful. And I had...
Yeah, no doubt.
And I didn't, again, like, while well-intentioned from some of the family, it wasn't effective. And I don't believe that any of that ever is effective. And so I didn't ever feel like I had a safe space to talk about what I was experiencing and what was going on in my head. Teachers back then were also contributing to that in ways that they probably didn't realize. Like two of them that really stick out in my head are my first grade teacher and my second grade teacher. My first grade teacher would just ridicule the shit out of you if you got caught picking your nose. I was in first grade. What first grader doesn't pick their nose? Like, let's get real here. And man, she would make you feel so fucking small. She'd call you dirty and gross and yell at you about how gross you are and make you go wash your hands and do it in front of everybody, and everybody would hear it.
That's the exact way to talk to a kid.
Right? And then in second grade, our teacher had this tattletale. She didn't want to hear about nothing. It was ridiculous. And if you told on somebody else, you had to wear the tattletale. And the tattletale was this long tail with a clothespin on it that she'd clip to your pants and you'd have to wear around the rest of the school. Now, again, our school is real small. It was kindergarten through 12th grade. So if you got the tattletale, you had to wear that to the lunchroom, and the whole school's in the lunchroom. Everybody gets to see that, oh, you got the tattletale on. Like, and when you're already in that group of people and you're already on the downhill side, all the shit, and those things come down, it makes it worse. So the teachers in that way, I look at, really contributed to a toxic environment in the school for a lot of kids.
I gotta say, man, those are some unique people. If they're teachers and they're doing that,
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like teachers are teachers are probably one of the most, if not the most important roles in society.
Yeah,
I mean, outside of like parents and stuff, I'm just saying, like, as far as institutions go, teachers are really, really important because they influence the upcoming generation. Like, most children, I don't know, children are at school, 8 hours a day or something, 7, 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's a huge, that's a third of their day, anyways, that's a unique situation.
Yep. And another layer to that, when I became a dad, I took this course called Positive Parenting Solutions because I realized, like, I didn't want to do things the same way. I wanted to do them different, but I didn't know what those tools were. So that course started that, like, parenting evolution. And two of the biggest things that came from that course: one, every child's most basic need is to feel a sense of belonging and significance.
Yep.
And you can give them that sense of belonging and significance through really anything. What they perceive as belonging is attention. When they have your attention, they feel that sense of belonging and significance. And if they don't have your attention, they'll lose connection with that. For a child, they don't understand the difference between negative attention and positive attention. Just attention. They don't have that emotional intelligence yet. It hasn't been developed. So within that, the idea is there's no such thing as a bad kid or a misbehaved kid, only a kid who's lacking belonging and significance. So if a kid is participating in negative attention seeking behavior, it's because they don't feel a sense of belonging in that moment. And as a mentor, teacher, parent, you can choose to give them that sense of belonging in a positive way, playing with them, or in a negative way and engage in the fight of it. And holy crap, as I learned that and I reflected on my life, I'm like, oh man, I remember being called a bad kid so many times. I'm like, I wasn't a bad kid. I just wanted positive attention.
Exactly.
And I wasn't getting it. That was just me trying to get attention. And as a father, whoa, like you really start to see that if you're conscious and paying attention when the kid is kind of like getting a little restless and you give them some positive attention, how quickly you can change their mood and their behavior. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So that really drove home a lot of those things, and I was able to reflect on life, and that helped me with a lot of self-forgiveness, because there was still a lot of like, oh, I was a bad kid carrying that baggage around. That learning that, I was like, oh man, I can set that down. I wasn't a bad kid. They were bad teachers. And that was really helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. I don't think I've ever heard that, man. That's thank you for sharing that.
For sure.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody explain that way.
Yeah, it was profound for me as well. When I learned that, it was like, holy crap, there's a lot here for me to unpack.
Yeah. All right, so suicidal at 12, you said you found sports, and then somewhere along the way you realized that what you were doing was still wasn't necessarily the right thing. So
right.
So when did that happen, do you think?
Well,
all right.
I think to set that up, I had when I first moved to Alaska in 2007 after college, a couple of months after that, I got into a relationship, and I struggled with romance for many years. I was not, that lack of confidence bleeds through into those pursuits, period. Right. And I got into this relationship and I was finally getting attention. I was like, oh yeah. And man, was my people pleasing running rampant. And I got walked all the fuck over.
I bet. Yeah.
All the fuck over for 2 years. And it wasn't even after that relationship that I had that realization, but it was the start of the next relationship, like with Vanessa, who I'm still with now to this day. I was like, man, I really like this person. I genuinely like this person. And it's not just because I'm getting the attention. There's something inside of me that is considerably different. And I was mowing the lawn one day and I got just smacked in the face with the baseball bat of anxiety, and my head just went spinning. So overwhelming. It was so intense. I've never had such an intense amount of anxiety and just a whirlwind of thoughts and overwhelming thoughts. And it was at that moment that amongst the swirl came through with clarity this idea of, I hadn't set down anything. All that pain was still within me. I didn't unpack anything. I haven't done the work, and I need to do the work. I want to create change. I no longer want to live life like this. So it was kind of like this moment of awakening. And at the same time, I'm like, but I have no idea what the fuck to do. And so at that time, I hired a therapist and life coach. She was a therapist in training, but presented as a life coach because for her, the way she liked to operate was not of a, we need to find your problems and fix your problems. No, we need to reconnect you to yourself. And so her approach was a little bit different and kind of like outside the therapy realm. And it actually it resonated with me a lot. And so that was why I hired her. And that started it. It was huge. I needed the tools to realize things like what other people do and say has nothing to do about me. It has everything to do about them. That's their expression.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And just learning different concepts and ideas like that finally start to allow me to let go of all the stuff that I was holding on to. Because at that point, too, I still held on to this idea of all those bullies called me names and hurt me. They need to come and apologize to me. And when they do that, that's when I'll be good. And
Yep.
I wasn't consciously aware of that at the time, but that's essentially how I was operating.
So you realized that you basically needed to do the inner work yourself. You needed to I mean, no matter what you were doing on the outside, you basically needed to work inside to really make this changes you wanted to make.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess you did that. You said through therapy. And were you at this time? Were you into the powerlifting the way you are now?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because I did my first powerlifting competition back in 1999, so I've been doing it for forever.
Right.
At that time, I was still just competing. I was kind of starting to coach a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay.
Because that would have been around 2012 or so when I had like that moment of like epiphany. And I didn't transition to coaching full time until 2017. But at the same time, like a lot of this journey of connecting to myself and learning how to express myself authentically and be truthful and be honest and learn to recognize patterns that aren't serving me and ones that are serving me and reorganize them into the way that I want them to be. Like that's really empowered me, not just as a lifter, but as a coach.
Right.
If you're entrenched in people pleasing behaviors, you can't lead anybody.
Exactly.
In anything, in any aspect, you have to be able to step into the truth, and whether that hurts or whether that pisses other people off or whether that pisses you off, it doesn't matter. The truth doesn't give a shit if you agree with it or not. It's the truth.
And to mention something earlier that you said too, about being offended, you talk about leading people. If you're going to get offended every time somebody says something to you, or if they act a certain way or do a certain thing, I mean, you're either one, you're going to drive yourself crazy, or two, you're not going to last, because you can't, you simply cannot function in that mental state.
Right.
And something I've learned too, man, and I'm not saying that the actions that we do or the things we say don't impact other people. They definitely do, and we should be aware of that. But most of the time in these situations, if somebody says something that's offensive to us, if they just kind of blow up at us for whatever, that is kind of their own issues they haven't addressed.
Yep.
If somebody has an issue that that they're taking out on other people, that doesn't really have anything to do with you.
Correct.
That's just because they have their own inner work, like what you're talking about. They have their work they haven't done yet. Now, again, if you do something or you say something to somebody, you should be aware of what you're saying, and you should be respectful to people. But if they just blow up at you, that's kind of, I heard something one time, and I wish I knew who said this. I don't know who said it, but I heard a quote that said, almost nothing requires a reaction from you. Almost nothing that people do or say requires a reaction from you. Because when you can understand that people are operating from their own, I guess, level of understanding or their own level of healed or unhealed trauma, it really, man, it changes the way you see everything.
Yeah.
Like it changes so many things. And it's people like you or people who are trying to be like you or on that path that you're on, who are fortunate enough to see that, hey, if somebody says something to me, if somebody does something to me, if it bothers me, this is why.
Right.
I have this thing that's not really healed in myself, or that still bothers me, and that's why I'm triggered. For lack of a better word, that's why I'm triggered by this.
Well, and you know what's fun about that word?
Triggered?
Yeah. Like, because it's the thing, it's the trigger, it's the thing that offends you, right?
Right.
And this is how you know that you need to walk the path of a healing journey. If you're triggered, if you're offended, that's your sign. Your trigger is your sign and your responsibility of where your hurt and pain lies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that needs your care, love, and attention. And you are the only one that can give that care, love, and attention that it needs to heal the wound so that it's not so damn sensitive.
Yep.
You are your doctor, period. So, look, I'm not perfect. There's still things that trigger me sometimes. And I'm like, what's up, dude? Why are you triggered by that? What about you? Do you need to touch on? Do you need to show some love to? Do you need to show some care to? It's not that person's fault, and at the same time, yes, there still does require a decent amount of respect from the other person. If somebody's just running around saying mean, hateful shit, like, that's not good. That's not healthy. And we don't need to take offense to it, and if somebody knows that something triggers you and they keep saying it anyway, well, then you need to remove them from your life.
Right.
Period. We don't have to be friends with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist. But
yeah, respect to you for that, man, because most people don't have the humility to see that if they get triggered by something, well, they probably wouldn't see it as a trigger. If they get bothered by something, most people don't have the humility to look inwards and say, okay, why is this bothering me? It's almost always somebody else's fault, and it's somebody else. And you got one person that says something to somebody and it triggers them, and then they respond to it by saying something else, and then it's just this snowball effect. And then next thing you know, there's a fist fight going on, and it's
right.
like this is not productive for anybody, man.
Yep.
So respect to you for that, because most people are not. We just don't have. I guess it's just hard for us to have that humility and say, that I could be wrong here.
Right.
Something is bothering me, and I need to figure this. I need to do some soul searching here and figure out why am I bothered by this thing.
Yeah. Well, there's so much of our culture and society that promotes this victimhood mindset and promotes all of that.
Yep.
And coddles to it, and it's the easy way.
Yep.
It's the easy way, and the easy way doesn't elevate and doesn't bring meaningful, joyful experiences ever. And we have to learn to go the other way. And one of the a really cool moment for me that really shifted that was we read this book called Conscious Parenting. And in that book, they talk about how your child isn't just teaching you. There's more to it that it can teach you. There's more that you can learn from your child. Your child is a mirror. They are an opportunity for soul level growth, because your child is going to reflect back to you your unconscious state, your unconscious operations. So like all those things that your kid does that piss you off, that's yours. And when I read that, I was like, oh man, okay. I get that. Okay. I want to try and embrace this a little bit here and see how this goes. And man, when I can stay good, and by good, I mean like grounded in myself, so that I am not reactionary. And when my kid like does something that irks me, I'm like, what did I do to promote this?
Yep.
And it's really cool. Then I realize, oh, well, okay, I get it. I see it now, and I shift my behavior, resolves the problem. And it's really neat how much easier it is once you can connect to that level of responsibility, rather than operate from that like authoritative control. Because dude, ain't nobody, no human in the history of ever is innate wanting to be controlled by other people.
Right.
As Marshall Rosenberg, the author of Nonviolent Communication, calls it, the most basic human need is autonomy. The most basic human right is autonomy.
Yep.
And authority of any kind undermines autonomy.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I could. I don't know if I should even say something to that, man, because the way you worded it, I'm not going to be able to one up it.
No worries.
It's not going to be up to par with what you just said. But I will say this: I feel like where we are now, or maybe the generation we're headed to, we have a lot more resources, I feel like, than what maybe our parents had or our
Definitely.
grandparents had. And I think it's important for us. I don't have children, but at some point I might. It's important for us, I think, to, as we progress as a generation, to use these tools and resources to try to. I don't really know how to say it other than to say to try to be better for the upcoming generation.
For sure.
And I mean, I'm not saying that our parents, that generation, I'm not saying they did anything wrong. They were just operating with what they had, with what they knew, and that was kind of it. That was it.
For
Like
sure.
you brought up something earlier. Boys aren't supposed to cry and toughen up and this kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that a lot. I've heard that a lot in my life, and that's just things that we were told. And now we're getting these resources. We have these books and these podcasts and things, and we're learning things as we go, and just hopefully we can use that, man. Hopefully we can use that in a productive way that maybe you and I can give tools and insights maybe that we didn't have.
Right.
So I think we're in a I don't know, people, the time that we're in now definitely has its problems, but on the other hand, man, we comparatively, we're in a really good time, I feel like,
For sure.
as far as resources and technology and wisdom from things. I mean, we can have all the information that we could really want at our fingertips.
Oh yeah.
I don't know anybody these days who does not have a cell phone,
Right.
and you could find out anything on this cell phone. I mean, there's podcasts and YouTube videos and all kind of things about any kind of topics. And it's
Ignorance
just a
is no longer
fascinating.
an excuse.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Ross, I want to get into some other things really quick. Let me take a real quick break. Let me stop this video just really
Okay.
quickly, and we'll get into we'll keep going here. Is there anything else that you want to say about your personal journey as far as like, getting up to this point where you're at now? Because I know what we've been kind of doing, I guess, is basically like telling your story while simultaneously, talking about how it kind of plays in.
Right.
And I don't want you to leave anything out of your specific story that you feel is important.
I mean, in general, it's scary to do the work. It's scary to look yourself in the mirror and realize how much of you're the common denominator in your life. You exist in every experience, so you, at a minimum, are co-contributing to every event and experience. And it's scary to look yourself in the mirror and be like, well, how are you contributing? What are you doing? But it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that fear. The way I've learned to grow into a lot of things is just any fear that I have that's not an immediate threat to my physical well-being needs to be leaned into,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what, because I know that there's high quality experiences just beyond that boundary of fear. They might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. And I think most people think, when they think of fear, they think that it's there to get them to avoid the thing, that whatever it is that they're afraid of. But I'm almost certain that it's a pretty like well-known thing in the psychological community that the way you get over a fear is slow exposure to it.
Right.
And going back to the confidence thing, man, if you do that, if there's something that you're afraid of doing, like let's say if you're afraid to join a gym, or you're afraid to talk to somebody, or whatever it is, if you let that fear influence you and you do that consistently every single time you have a fear, well, the next thing you're afraid of everything, and you're not able to speak your mind or set boundaries, and the next thing you know, people are walking all over you because you don't have boundaries, and again, it's this snowball effect. It influences it from your perspective, from where you're standing. It influences the way the world sees you, because everybody, it seems like, sees you this way. But yeah, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I know we only have 20 minutes or so. Okay, so the inner work. So you did the inner work, and you I guess maybe through the inner work you found out that you were kind of people pleasing. Was that right? And you weren't really operating from your own, your core. And it's
Yep.
interesting that you bring up the core values, man, because I had a guy on a couple guests ago, Carlos, and he was talking about the way that you find purpose is to identify what those core values are. Without that, it's hard to I mean, it's hard to have a direction if you don't know your own core values.
Agreed.
So it's interesting that you bring that up. I would like to change gears. If you think we're kind of caught up to where you are now, I'd like to get your opinion on something really quick.
Okay.
Which is just the general mental health that's in society these days. And I guess this would apply to men or women. But so I'm going to say something. I don't want to offend you. I don't know if what your experience is with this, but well, just to preface, I've kind of made it clear, I think, with a couple of people that I'm not really a fan of like SSRIs, like the antidepressants.
Okay.
The antidepressant medications. I mean, I think there's a very small portion of people that they work for. But I think a lot of times, man, I just feel like they cause more issues than what they claim to solve, basically. Right. I mean, there's these lists of side effects with these things. And again, I mean, some people they work great for, and that's great. I think people should use them if they work for them. But where I'm tying this in is I've always kind of thought and said and believed that if you can do something with your physical body, if you can use whether it's fitness or MMA or powerlifting or whatever it is, if you can at least try to do that first before you go the chemical route. If you can try to do something with your physical body, man, or even if it's not that, if it's try to do something productive towards a goal, I just feel like that's a better starting point than I mean, I think the chemicals should be a last resort. And again, it's easy for me to say that because I'm on the outside looking in. Thankfully, I'm not really a person who's experienced a lot of depression in my life. If anything, there's been anxiety. That's kind of been my thing.
Right.
So fortunately, I'm not in a place where I can maybe comment on that because I just don't have that experience. Maybe if I was in that boat, I would say, look, whatever it takes, give me whatever. I'll take 5 pills a day or whatever. Maybe that's how I would feel. I don't know because this is a subjective view right now. But I don't know, man. I just feel like, because with what I do in my life and where I am in my life, it's almost always that the gym and fitness and doing something physical makes me personally feel better. Almost always. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Like, what do you, I mean, as far as like I don't want to say we use fitness or that physical exertion as a substitute, but like, I mean, do you think that's a good starting point for people who are in that kind of low place? And maybe too, maybe we should distinguish clinical depression and feeling depressed. If somebody has if somebody's clinically depressed, maybe that's when the SSRIs come in handy. But if they're feeling depressed, I mean, it's easy to feel depressed these days, man.
For sure.
Like, I mean, you get on the news and you're instantly depressed. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that. And I know, like I said, different people maybe have different opinions on that, but am I somewhere in the ballpark with that, or am I just kind of like talking out of my ass here, or what do you think?
Well, you didn't upset me because that's your opinion. Mm-hmm. There might be some other people out there that are listening that are upset and might be upset with me even more because I'm going to agree with you and up-level that. Like, drugs are bad, period, whether they're legal or illegal. Drugs treat a symptom, not the underlying cause of the symptom. So, like, especially in this world, especially in that realm of mental health. Now, yes, there are always exceptions because everything's on a spectrum. It's not black or white. It's not yes or no. It's not good or bad. It's everything. It's the full fucking color of the rainbow. Like, so there are people out there that exist that need medication. However, the percentage of those people that need medication are very low. The percentage of people that need other intervention, that need just exercise or better nutrition or knowledge that they're okay, different tools to regulate their nervous system, their mind, their thoughts, those are the things that create sustainable change. That relationship that I told you about earlier in the episode, towards the end of that, I had high blood pressure and anxiety, and doctors prescribed me some antidepressant medicine, and I started taking it. And literally the day that I broke up with her, I looked at that bottle and I'm like, I don't need this shit anymore. And I threw it in the garbage, and I haven't had a problem a day since. That anxiety and shit that I was feeling and experience was a result of me denying myself. continuously, and being involved in a relationship that was toxic. Like, your emotions are there to guide you. So if you are having an anxious moment, it's there to guide you. You don't suppress that shit. Suppression is depression. And that's what those drugs do, is they suppress those underlying emotions that you're not listening to. So you will remain in that state of being. It doesn't help you elevate out of that state of being ever. And like, that's the other hard part about this. It's so inundated into our culture to take the easy way out, and it's easier to take a pill than look at yourself in the mirror and be like, how the fuck are you showing up today?
Dude, oh my God, you just read my mind, bro. like I was literally thinking it's easier to take a pill than it is to actually do the work. Do whether it's the physical work or the mental work. But like, here's my thing though, Ross. Like, so if somebody's in that situation, they may need the medication, and I get that. But like, what's it going to hurt if you just try to get in shape first? Just try to go to the gym first. Like, what is that going to hurt? Like, is that going to hurt the situation?
Yeah. A good example.
At the very least, you're fit and you're taking antidepressants.
Yep. A good example of that, a little different because it's more weight loss and nutrition. I knew somebody who was talking about getting a gastric bypass surgery. I'm like, come on, let me write you a diet plan that I think you'll be more successful with. It'll have more, I knew the background of this person, and I knew that the strictness of their previous diet plans was the problem. I'm like, let me set you up with success with some flexibility so that you can eat the things that you want to eat. It's just a matter of portioning what you're eating. He agreed, started doing it, went into his next doctor's visit, like pre-surgery, and he had already been losing a bunch of weight, and his doctor's like, oh, wow, can I get this plan from your friend? Like, I could give this to people and they could do way better, and a lot of people wouldn't need this surgery. You might not need this surgery. And he came back and told me that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. All right, man, that's fantastic. And he followed that up with, but I'm going to get the surgery anyway. And my mind just fucking short circuited. I'm like, why would you continue to proceed with an elective surgery when this lifestyle change and intervention is working? It irked me. This particular person proceeded to get this intervention, proceeded to get the gastric bypass surgery, got it, lost more weight after the surgery. And like the vast majority of people who get gastric bypass surgery after that first year of success immediately put it back on, because it's a lifestyle issue. The weight is a lifestyle reflection, sedentary lifestyle, overeating lifestyle, pizza and all that stuff. And movies, like, we need to be active and we need to be mindful of what we eat. That doesn't mean we have to eat chicken and rice every dang meal. We don't have to be professional bodybuilders, but we do need to be mindful. And so all that stuff is just a reflection of your lifestyle choices. And at the end of the day, the way I look at this is there's the tripod. There's your physical well-being, your mental well-being, and your spiritual well-being. And the choices you make and the things you do fuel the quality and level of the well-being of each of those tripods, each of those legs of the tripod. And when you are making choices that don't support that leg, eventually that tripod's going to fall over. And that's when you're going to have all these problems and all these symptoms and all these pains and all these things that you're going to the doctor for and treating and fixing and covering up and masking and hiding. But it's not going to change anything because the stool is still falling over.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
So yeah, drugs are bad.
Yeah, for sure. And something else too, man, I'm aware and I understand there are people who don't believe in depression. They don't believe in mental illness. I mean, I think these things are, this is a scientific thing. I'm pretty sure that there's a whole community of PhDs who are dedicated to this, but like, there's still people who don't believe in depression or other mental health. But I will say that my thing, when somebody says like, what would be what would be a way to phrase it when they say like, I have depression? Like if someone says I have depression, well, it's like, are there things in your life that are depressing you? You know, like you said, this tripod. How does this tripod look? Is this tripod well taken care of, or is something lacking here? You know, so in other words, like, do you have this depression, or are there things that you feel like you could maybe improve that maybe you're not? You know, and I love the way you said it. I'm going to use that, man. This tripod. How does this tripod look?
Right.
Because I just feel like when someone says that, that implies that they can't fix it.
Right.
You know, it's like saying, well, I have brown hair, I have green eyes. You know, that's just the way it is. And that implies that there's nothing they can do. And again, you know, we're not talking about that very small percentage of people who maybe cannot, who maybe really do need the ongoing medication and things, but we're talking about the vast majority. That implies they can't do anything to change that. And it's not just with depression. I mean, I've done it too with, when I say I have anxiety, that means that I'm saying to myself that I have a condition that I'm going to react a certain way if something happens. But in reality, I'm seeing this thing this way, and the fight or flight is kind of like taking over and
Right.
going to it into advanced mode. And I don't know, that's what really bothers me with that, man. People just, it implies that you can't do anything to change it.
Right. I think a really cool way to learn to switch the language around, because language is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The phrase, they call it spelling because it puts a spell on you. Right. So that's why your self-talk's so important as well. But if we learn to shift some of that language from I have depression or I have anxiety to I'm experiencing depression, I'm experiencing anxiety, the thing that's momentarily. Every emotion on the entire emotional spectrum is a temporary thing to experience in that moment based on all kinds of different numbers of factors.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all temporary. They go away. They have ebb and flow. Every single one of them. The good and the bad. And since people can't see that, I'm putting good and bad in quotations because they also don't need to be labeled as good or bad. They just are. You're just experiencing it. So when we think about anxiety as being this bad thing that I need to get away from and push away, no, that's something we need to lean into and experience and sit with and be with. When we sit with it and be with it for a minute, we can understand what it's trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you understand what it's trying to tell you, you can take action that pushes you in that direction. Like,
exactly,
your emotions they're a built-in GPS. They can help guide you towards experiences that you desire and away from experiences that you don't desire. But you can't feel them if you're, taking a bunch of pills to get rid of them. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, exactly. Ross, I know you got to wrap up shortly. Before we get to that point, do you want to do you have like a social media or a website or podcast or something that you want to share or promote?
Yeah, I always love to hear from people. It's fantastic to learn that the sharing of these stories can help empower people. So people can find me and reach me on Instagram, ross.leppala. Same thing on Facebook, can find me there. I also host a mental health and well-being podcast called Project UnchainED, which is really the idea of unchaining ourselves from our self-limiting thoughts and beliefs and learning where we need to take greater responsibility. And through that responsibility, we can go forward and cultivate and create the things that we really want to be a part of.
Okay. There was something I wanted to ask you about earlier, and I'm trying to stay present in the conversation, man. So it kind of slipped my mind. I find that I do that often. You know, I'll be talking to somebody, and I'm so wrapped up on what they're saying at the moment that I guess I'm gonna have to start writing down a list.
Oh yeah,
you know, as things come to mind, I just kind of jot them down. I do have a question though before we close out. If you had if you had to kind of pinpoint the most important lesson or the most important thing you've learned, or maybe one of the most important, because I know it's kind of hard to isolate just on one.
Right.
What do you think that would be, or one of the things?
I definitely think the most pivotal lesson is just the idea of personal responsibility. Like,
Hmm.
like I said, indicated a little bit earlier, I spent so much of my life unconsciously waiting for those tormentors and those bullies to apologize to me and make it better. And that doesn't come. That
Mm-hmm.
never, ever comes. And if you're waiting for that moment, you're going to be stuck waiting forever. The only thing that ever steps forward and pushes you forward in life is your responsibility for how you are participating. And at the end of the day, look, bad things happen to good people. And life isn't about what happens to you. Life is about how you respond to what happens to you. And that's where your power lies, is in your responsibility. Like, and the deeper I embody that, the higher the quality my experiences become. Even in those moments where it seems like it's not my responsibility, right? Like how I talked about the kid thing earlier, and looking at the way she's behaving and thinking about what am I doing, even though it's her behavior, right? Like I'm still looking at it from what am I doing to breed this environment? And man, it really makes for a good time. And on that idea too, it also brings a lot closer connection between her and I. And at the end of the day, we're social beings and social creatures, and that fuels it, is that connection with other people.
Yep.
And yeah, it just, like, that was the thing that really started shifting me away from living a life of waiting for somebody else to do it, and just take the responsibility and embrace that on a radical level and do it. Because and even thinking about it from all the way back from when I was bullied, right? Like, looking back on it that far back, I'm like, yeah, I didn't take responsibility. While I didn't necessarily have the tools, like, that's when I started that people-pleasing trend. And to me, well, of course, no wonder why I wasn't getting treated with respect. I wasn't respecting myself. I was showing up as a people pleaser. That isn't respect. And what does the old saying go? Respect is earned, not given. Like, and that's how it's earned, by you showing up from a place of self-respect. And the only way that you can demonstrate self-respect is through authenticity. And you have to take, to me, the only way to show up in life authentically like that is through that radical personal responsibility.
I agree 100%. Yep, 100%. And you made a good point too. Even when you feel like you're not at fault, and I've said that before, and people think I'm crazy when I say that, but I mean, I don't want to get out another rabbit hole. We got to close up here shortly. Ross, if you had to say something to that 12-year-old Ross, what do you think you would tell that person? I mean, if you had to, if knowing kind of what you knew then, and kind of everything you've learned now, and kind of, where you're at, if you had to maybe just give some encouragement or give something to that younger you, what do you think you would tell them?
So a really fun tool that I've used in that same light, in that same lens, is I've done a lot of meditation sessions where I will kind of visualize and allow myself to try and feel and experience it too, and like create it as though it was a real environment and a real thing. Because one of the cool things about brain science is your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and perception. So like you can create an event that never happened in your mind and think about it and perceive it as being real. So I'll go that far with it to try and make it as real of an experience as possible during that meditation. And adult Ross, will go to young Ross in all different kinds of scenarios. And a couple of them that are really important, that have really shifted the landscape of some of that, I would go play with myself. And when I was a kid, I loved playing in the sandbox, construction, dump trucks, bulldozers, and adult Ross would go play with little Ross.
Right.
And like I just visualized adult Ross giving little Ross words of encouragement, like you're not a bad kid. You're a good kid. You're a smart kid. You're a capable kid. You're a competent kid. You're like all these self-affirming things, and just be with him and show him
Mm-hmm.
some kindness and care and compassion in moments like that. And then as well, do it in moments when I felt like I needed somebody to help me and I needed help,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be defending myself against a bully or even standing up to my parents and expressing a need that I didn't know I needed. Right. And there's times where I've meditated adult Ross coming in and intervening between my dad and myself and expressing the need that I didn't have the capability of expressing. And man, there's been some freaking powerful meditations to come from that. Really powerful. And that's been really cool and neat to ground myself and be connected with myself and be connected with that inner child and learn to like let go of some of the pain and hurt and anger towards other people significantly. Like, to the point where, like I say, I'll try and like let it be
Mm-hmm.
a full experience, and I'll like come out of the meditation and just overwhelmed with all kinds of different feelings, and I'll have to cry and part of that shift and change for me is allowing myself to cry in those moments, and
Mm-hmm.
then also thinking about the tears as like washing away the things that no longer serve me. And that's been lightening.
Yep.
It lightens this presence of me, and I can open and expand and not feel like I have to shrink and play small.
That's really fascinating, man. That's a fascinating way to put that. I've heard people talk about something similar, but with a future version of themselves.
Oh yeah.
Imagine a life they want, and they imagine that life. They meditate with it, and they see themselves with the success or whatever. And it's that is a incredibly powerful way to either heal yourself or to visualize the life that you want. We all have this inner child, and this is a real thing that I don't think people are aware of. I don't think we are aware of how um, influential that inner child is to us.
Agreed.
And the some of the, like you said, you just kind of given yourself the support and the encouragement that you wish you maybe had at the moment. And I can't imagine how I don't think I myself have I've never done it that way. I've never looked back past. I've looked into the future and tried to visualize things, but I've never looked backwards. And I don't know, maybe it's just worth it for all of us to give that a try one day, just to kind of look back and be that person that we need to be. Because I think that's an important thing for all of us, man. I think we kind of have to be our own hero. You have family and you have friends and you have people, but the truth is that nobody is coming to save you. When it, like you said, your own inner work, these own things that we're dealing with, our own trauma and issues, you kind of have to do the work yourself. Nobody is coming to save you, and you have to do the work that you have to do to be at the place that you want to be. And the fascinating thing here is that you can pick the character that you want to play in this video game of life. You can be the person that you want to be. Like, if you have these passions and these dreams, these desires to do things, those things aren't accidental.
Right.
If you have a passion for writing or drawing or making music or podcasting or whatever it is, like, these things are not accidental. They're there for a reason. They're calling you for a reason. And I think that those make really good outlets that we can be, that we can use that avenue as sort of a way to heal ourselves. I mean, I can't, like, just think about a musician, man. Like, there's so much negative stories in music, like so much pain in music, but that's an outlet for them, and then people resonate with that. The same thing with art. Like, I'm not an artist at all, and
Yeah.
but I'm sure that those people have something that's inspiring that, whether it's an emotion or whatever, or maybe an acid trip, who knows. But the
Right.
point is, like, there's something there that's inspiring that.
Right. For sure. And I look at it too, like when you find those things that you're passionate about, whether it be art or music or podcasting or reading books or different things of that nature. It is those things and doing those things to me that cultivates a lot of that internal validation and internal belonging, is doing those things. And you can do those things. And what I've found personally is I stopped consuming so many distractions in my life. Like I shut TV off. I haven't had cable TV in years. And where I used to watch it all the time. I used to play a lot of video games, and now I don't look at any of those things. Like those just distract me from participating in the things that I'm really, actually, truly passionate about. And those are the things that add value to my life. And when I'm doing the things that add value to my life, I'm going to have that internal grounding.
Yep. Well, those things also distract you from the work that you should, be doing. Like they make it temporarily. They make things temporarily okay.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier, you're just kind of at that point, you're just kind of repressing the things that need to be addressed.
Yep.
And we do that with alcohol, TV, whatever it is. People have different vices, I guess.
Yep.
But Ross, I know you got to get out of here, man. We got to do this again, because I'd love to get your thoughts on some things, maybe like more of like men's issues, kind of from just specifically about men.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of things going on these days that well, there's so much going on. We're in an interesting era for sure.
Definitely. Definitely.
But I'd love to get your thoughts on some things, man. But I appreciate your time, dude. I appreciate the wisdom and the insight. This has been an incredible conversation with you. And I'm glad that you're kind of using this in a productive way. You've taken some things that you've learned and you're applying that to use it to other people. I think that's incredible. I think that's what it's all about. I think when we can do things that way, it kind of gives the trauma that we had, like we were talking about earlier, gives it a purpose.
Yep.
And because what it's like to be in that spot, and you just want to help somebody who's in that spot because you yourself, you needed that at one point, so
therein lies the meaning behind the suffering.
That's it, man.
And when you find that, you set it down, and you no longer hold on to the pain of the suffering. You can move forward. So yeah, man, I appreciate the time as well. I always enjoy being able to hop on a show and talk about this stuff and find that it reaches more people and supports more people to walk these paths and learn how to set down their self-limiting beliefs. And I'm down to have a conversation about it from a masculine perspective as well.
For sure, man. For sure.